Alright, in the process of me breaking things down, I've had a terrible, 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 terrible discovery. Look at that. So what I was hoping for, which I hope for in many things, is that you break something down far enough and you check things, the problem will expose itself. Now look at that. This is the first time me seeing that. Now right now I'm basically turning the serpentine belt, and as you can see, coolant is pumping right out of the intake.
No more pretending. See it, and if I want it, you know I'ma get it. Cause I'm a hustler, stay on my grind to go get it. Fuck with a nigga saying I ain't fearing no nigga. These lanes be talking, but it be behind my back. Scared to say it to my face, cause they know how I react. Keep a lot of straps so we could throw them hands, you won't do that. So why you talking behind my back? Like you on a strap? Nigga, this ain't no rap. This here is real shit. Got these pussy niggas mad, all up in they feelings. But me, I'm posted up. Got these hoes like I feel them. And wanna dime, Polo Nino, yes, I'm him.
For the day, I hope you enjoyed. Alright, I had to, it's too hard trying to record and do what I gotta do. I'm kind of, this is my personal vehicle, so I kind of want to go through the process at a rapid rate while I have days off of work. So, but key points I'm gonna stop at. Now this is one of those key points. As you can see, this whole thing is out. That's for the cabin air. I got the air housing off, and I got this weather strip. I'm gonna show you the progress under the hood. Pretty much pop the fuel injectors loose, all up and down. Sorry about that, my battery had died. Like I was saying, as you saw, I took all the bolts out the intake. It is one way back there in the back. Popped all the fuel injectors loose, moved this out of the way. I just kind of took the two hoses off and tucked it over to the side, disconnected everything, unscrewed it from these, which is the valve covers. Moved the harness completely out of the way. Oh, I left one injector still hooked up. Make sure all the injectors hooked up all the way around. But once you get that back piece out, which is right here, which is nothing but a screw here, screw right here. I'm gonna put the nut back on. Always a good maintenance tip, technical tip, mechanic tip. Put the screws back in place so that way you don't have to look for them when it's time to put them back together. And this screw here, just taking these two screws loose opened up the whole access to all of this right here. As you can see, that's going to the inside of the car because that's a clean air unit. For the inside, I was able to take all of that stuff loose, and look how much space it freed up. I mean, it's like that made this job 1,000 times easier. So now I can reach everything in the back with no problem. People be hating on foreign cars, but hey. And even though this is a big motor and it's congested, as you can see, there's not a lot of side left to right. You can see though, intake is pretty much loose. I got something in the back holding it on. I'm gonna take that off. I also removed this, just unplugged it. Unscrewed it just like I did the other side away from the valve cover gaskets. And as you can see, all the injectors are unplugged all the way around. So the intake is pretty much halfway out. You can see right there. See, I had to set my light up, zip tied it to that. It's the only light I have. Had to get my air hooked up to Dyson because it's smoking hot down here in Texas, especially in this garage. And these were all of my intake bolts that I'm putting in a sandwich bag that I'm going to label intake bolts. So if I have to go further in this process, then I know I label. It's good practice also to put everything in the bag and label it. That way everything is together when it's time to put back together. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next step. By the time you get back to this video, the intake will be completely off in a minute. Alright, as you see, Finally, the intake is off. One thing that I didn't mention was this EGR tube. I took the bolts going in that way. Take those two bolts out, which is here. Also, make sure you don't lose that gasket because you're going to reuse it. I'm going to put it in my intake bolts bag with the throttle gas. With the EGR tube gasket. You don't have to take this loose, except from there, because it's to hold it from coming up. Also, this big plug right here. This plugs up into the back of the intake, and that line right there, which is just you squeeze the sides of it and pull it back. This one has a little tab at the bottom. I'm not sure if you can see that. Let me try to zoom in. Well, I have a little tab at the bottom. You just kind of squeeze it and pull it out. So none of that was really difficult. In all honesty, this is probably about hour and a half worth of work. I was trying to see how the cooling setup was, hoping that it may have just been the intake gaskets, but now I see this is like the thermostat housing setup. And as you can see by these two big, I don't want to say humps, but these paths, two big paths, path on this side, path on that side, that's how coolant flows directly into the head. So it's very possible it's a head situation. And these motors, from the look of them, they look like they are maybe a dual cam setup at the top, with a timing chain. So the next step would be to take the valve covers off. This is nothing left on here but the knock sensors. I can kind of put that in the middle now. This, still leave all of this connected. Everything is still kind of connected to the motor. I'm just going to set that off up in there. So next would be the valve cover gaskets. The valve covers completely the coil packs, so I can expose the cams, and hopefully I don't have to get too much into that timing situation. That would mean the entire front of the motor, the fan and all that stuff will have to come off as well. So part one, intake, is off. Let me show you the intake. This is pretty much all I had to remove. The air cleaner, the cabin air filter unit. This little bag situation it sits inside the valley, intake valley, and on this intake. Now this is the intake. It kind of set along this side. That's why you see the brownness over here. You can see these gaskets it's worn out too. You zoom in some. I got a lot of damage to it. See that right there? That's a bad intake gasket. Mostly on this side. But this is pretty much what the intake looks like. Now the intake comes in two halves. This is the lower. The metal part of it is the lower part. This gas wasted all on me. You will need the tool for this, the little scissor tool to pop that loose. Same as a Ford or a GM fuel line. Right there, see the sensor? That was the sensor I was talking about, and the plug I was talking about that you do have to pop up off the back. And these two are the two smaller screws, and you can see the two bigger screws. It's a total of 5 screws on each side. So 10 screws. Pop everything off, and that's it. Now I can take this plastic portion off if I remove a few more bolts, and to expose, like if I wanted to replace the gasket inside of there or whatever. But that's pretty much the intake and how it looks. So this is part one, intake removal. I'm gonna take the valve covers off, which is basic. Anyone can do that. Probably take about 30 minutes, and then it will expose if I have to deal with the timing or not in a minute. What's going on YouTube? Back, this is day 2 of my overheating, or I'm not gonna necessarily say overheating, I'm gonna say unable to bleed or coolant flow issue. As you saw in the other videos, the smoke, and yesterday I went on and just broke the intake and stuff down. Let me turn this radio down. You can see I'm all set up in here. It's a great show I like to listen to while I work on car.
That was me. I just couldn't sit in that
Let me
classroom.
pause it. So now you can hear me. I usually listen to music, but I like to learn new things, so I'm listening to money management, finances, blah blah blah. In any case, let me show you where we at now on the vehicle. I decided to pick up the camera and record, but I have started on many things. One of them, and it's terrible light, it's no light like daylight. As you can see, I removed the thermostat housing, which is that right there. Got to disconnect things all down here. Let me zoom in. Got to disconnect things all down there. Disconnect a bunch of the hoses. I moved the thermostat housing so that I can take this hose off. And the goal for me at this moment is to take the whole housing off, which it is 4 bolts. Disconnect a bunch of hoses, disconnect the upper and lower radiator hose, which they both connect to that. And I'm going to, the goal is to take this off so I can look inside of there and see what I need to see. That's one thing. Then after that, I want to go move on to removing the water pump. So I'm moving that out the way so I can get to the water pump, 4 bolts. It's a little challenge to get to with the fan shroud in the way, but I don't want to have to remove the fan shroud because that means I have to remove the fan assembly. So I moved all of this stuff out the way. Let me show you again. Get my little flashlight. I moved all of this stuff. I'm moving all of this stuff out the way so I can be able to reach my hand in there and get to those 4 bolts to take that housing apart. So that's pretty much where I am at on the video. As you can see, I blocked off all the hoses, all the holes for the intake, which that definitely needs to get cleaned up. I was hoping to take the intake apart that I may have been able to notice something, but honestly, I didn't. I saw no cooling down in there. I took spark plugs out. I saw no cooling down the spark plug holes, which raises concern for me, because typically, if I initially start the vehicle, it'll smoke. It don't even take any time, and it'll just keep dumping smoke. So let me flip the camera back around. I'm working on one theory, which is this, the positive crankshaft ventilation valve, which could be bad, which will allow smoke to go straight out of the tailpipe. I'm working on that theory, and I'm also working on potential reason the water pump. Let me sit down for this. Oh man, stretching my legs. Oh, I was young, man. I used to be knocking this stuff out. Now I'm learning to take my time, and I don't have a choice. But in any case, my next theory is that it could potentially be water pump. The water pump going out would explain why I didn't have coolant flow, and it also will explain because there was different points of time where it'll go to hot and then it'll cool down. So I know that it'll go down to half. So I know the thermostat's working, but I still would not have efficient flow going through the bleeder valve, the bleeder screws, and I still would not have not just efficient flow, but I had a loss of power. Now, driving my car initially, the first few times it was running, it went to the hot side, which your car will go. The Range Rover is designed to go into lit mode when it runs hot, and it will not start back up until a certain amount of time. I don't know what they put in the system, but that's just how it works. It'll keep turning over, but it will not start. Now, if you sit and wait 20 minutes or so, then it'll start. It allowed me to drive like maybe another mile. The coolant needle went to hot, then it went down to normal, then it shot back up to hot again and stayed there. It never go to hot. It went to the notch before redlining or hot. But I have a decrease in power, and if I get off the gas, the car will shut off. Alright, in the process of me breaking things down, I've had a terrible discovery. Look at that. So what I was hoping for, which I hope for in many things, is that you break something down far enough and you check things, the problem will expose itself. Now look at that. This is the first time me seeing that. Now right now I'm basically turning the serpentine belt, and as you can see, coolant is pumping right out of the intake. So my concerns on whether or not it was an intake gasket, a head gasket, has been revealed. It looked like it's on, definitely on this one side so far. And that's just with me turning. Let me flash the light so you can see exactly what it is I'm turning. See, I have the fan clutch wrench on there. I'm just turning that, which is just a pulley for the fan. It's not even connected to the water pump. But the water pump is connected to the belt. So if I turn that, I'm turning all of it. So I got the fan clutch connected to there, and all I'm doing is turning that up and down, and look what started happening. Coolant started pushing through this head right here. Start pushing out of it. As you can see, it's really the only one. So most likely my problem is on this side, but unfortunately, disastrously, it let me know I definitely have a head problem. Somewhere, coolant is leaking into the intake. This is not even on the piston side. This is on the, it's not on the piston side. This is where the intake manifold sits for that one cylinder. So somehow coolant is backing up into that, which could still be a head gasket problem, or it could be another problem. I'm not sure, but that lets me know that this is going, all my suspicions have been confirmed. Head is definitely an issue, and now I have to do a head gasket replacement, take the heads off and get a machine, set the timing up, the whole nine, so the whole front pulleys have to come off and the heads have to come off. So no more thinking about it now, it's just time to get to the work. Sucks though. In a minute.